Hey guys, welcome to the MC Anime Podcast. We cover anime, geek culture, Japanese aesthetics, and Asian studies. We are a multi-fandom podcast, and you can expect to hear topics in your favorite hobby or fandom activity potentially. You can find MC Anime on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Also, please check out mcanimepodcast.com, our website. Furthermore, stay tuned in for another episode.
Guys, welcome to another episode of MC Anime. It's MC for the MC Anime Podcast. We're back with Leah. How you doing today?
Yeah, living life. Since I'm down here in Florida, there's a hurricane, and this has been. I'm pretty chill because I'm used to them, but everyone who I know that's moved here is having an absolute mental breakdown. The amount of are you alive that I have died like the last 2 days, even though nothing has happened, but it's rained last night. That's been it so far. So, some branches are on the ground, but it's nothing crazy. But yes, I've had people absolutely in a panic. It's great. It's wonderful. It's nice to feel like the normal one for once when you're a Floridian. Everyone else is having stage 4 breakdowns regarding the storm, and then I bought some energy drinks, and that's about it. So I play video games while the storm rages on. But yeah, so I'm good.
The storm rages on.
Can't do nothing about Mother Nature, so here we be. How are you?
Doing pretty well. Still excited about my rabbit hole discussion and taking different topics and doing a totally different topic, but I think overall I'm peachy and I'm ready for today's episode.
Nice. Okay. Peachy is a do one.
Guys, do not forget to find us some podcasts near you, Apple, Google, etc. Also, watch more content on the www.mcmapodcast.com and join us on Patreon to support our channel and give original ideas and poll ideas. But further ado, this episode is Titanic movie review. We're going to review the Titanic and the implications of the movie and, a little bit about the real event that was based on.
I mean, this is a pretty famous movie. Almost everyone I know has actually seen it. So if you guys haven't seen or heard of the Titanic, it's a famous movie starring Leonardo DiCaprio and oh no, who's the other actress?
Yeah.
Who's the other actress? It's not Drew. My brain said Drew. Kate Winslet. So basically, came out in 1997. It is a romantic drama between a poor stowaway, essentially Leonardo DiCaprio's character named Jack, and a rich, almost heiress named Rose, who she is engaged to someone else when they meet, and basically he teaches her how to have fun and break free of her societal shackles, and she shows him how to think in different ways and see the world in different ways than maybe just the kind of pessimistic view that he can have from having to struggle through life. And all of this takes place during the voyage of the famous Titanic, which was deemed the unsinkable ship that did end up sinking back in 1912. It was literally on its first voyage. Hit an iceberg because I guess it wasn't understood that icebergs, the tip of the iceberg that sticks out is the smallest piece, and there's a huge block of ice underneath the water. So yeah, so the story takes place throughout that whole voyage. It ends after the ship goes down.
Oh yeah, and one perspective I like about Titanic was the actual introduction is not actually the full movie yet. It's actually them going on the Titanic wreckage in the ocean, and Rose letting the salvage team. There's a story that they need to hear, and Rose, I think, is telling the story from her perspective. She's one of the few survivors, and Rose is actually the main character of the movie. So it's like a kind of like a flashback scene, and I believe the actor who's Rose in the original incarnation is the original survivor. If I'm not mistaken. I think she was. I think she was a survivor of it. I'm not sure. But they were telling from
I can find out though.
True, you look that up. I'm not big trivia, but I do know that's kind of where it started. So let's just start from there. So the salvage team comes in. They're trying to find the wreckage of the Titanic, and they're actually finding, I believe, they're going in to find the treasure or the galleon, and they find it and they unravel it. It's the same initials, Rose, and she's trying to speak to them. So at the same moment they realize they want to speak with her, she's trying to contact them. So I think that's kind of cool how that started. And you get like a introductory scene into the flashback of the Titanic and how it happened.
I don't know. In my brain, I thought it started with Rose, old Rose. She's like this older woman. It's like what's her line? It's like it's been 76 years. But anyway, I remember it being essentially that I thought it was her granddaughter who was a part of the team. Yeah, I thought it was her granddaughter who was a part of the team to go and recover the stone, because that's the whole point. They're going out there. They found the wreckage for the Titanic, and they're going to look for this family jewel that Rose had lost during the wreckage.
I remember now. They found the jewel, and they had nothing. They have no clue what it's about, but somehow they're getting a call from the family member talking about that jewel that they're so complex about why it's there and how it got there. So all of a sudden, this person has invested interest, but now they want to know the story behind it. That's how we get into it.
No, I just looked it up. So the actual the story starts is there's a guy called Brock Lovett who him and his team they go and they search for the wreck of the Titanic. They found the safe that was supposed to hold the necklace that was called the Heart of the Ocean, because it's this big blue diamond or jewel. But instead of finding that in the safe, they just found a drawing of a young woman, and it was of Rose Hewitt. And so they actually end up finding her, bringing her on board. Rose Calvert, and bringing her on board, and then she starts retelling the story. Because I explicitly remember her being on board. I thought either a submarine or ship.
Yeah, I thought it was Rose that survived that had the necklace, because that's the only explanation why that wasn't in the safe, because she survived. Is the same woman.
She had it. They were looking for it, and then they reached out to her and brought her on board. And then she starts retelling the story of the Titanic.
Yeah. So I was originally right. I'd be all confused for nothing.
Yeah. So she comes on board. She tells this story. And the movie is basically one long flashback. So basically, like, 4 episodes of Dragon Ball Z or something. So it's fine. Yeah. So yeah, she retells the story of basically her boarding the ship and all these adventures happening, and then the ship going down, her lost love, and then we're brought back to the present. And there we are.
Yeah. I think it creates like the ongoing conflict of what happened and how she survived, but also the enduring joy of them being on the ship and having like a different telltale sign of, Titanic being a historic event.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of those stories where there are so many, like, for instance, I enjoy true crime, but there is a high abundance of true crime movies and shows and podcasts and all that. But back in the early 90s, this wasn't even something like true crime. It was just a tragic historical event that happened about 70, 80 years prior to. So people had heard about it, and we learned about it in school. But getting to see the movie kind of play out as if you're also a passenger on board really captivated people. And it was a very romantic story. I mean, now we make a lot of jokes and memes about it, but back then it was a very romantic and beautiful story and very heartbreaking. Yeah. So, but I mean, I think anyone can watch the Titanic. I think everyone at this point might have seen it, and if you haven't, you at least know the main one.
Yeah, and I also think the original director intended to be a romantic type movie, James Cameron, but also wanting to tell the story of the Titanic in a different lens. That was his approach. So the romantic type storyline with a little bit of comedy played along of that retelling lens of the Titanic story in a way that was, appealing to other people in a different way.
Well, I think he did it smartly because the thing that gets the Titanic such rave reviews and why it's so popular is because as you're watching it, and because it's a romance movie, you already know what's supposed to happen. You already know how things are going to go and what the outcome is supposed to be. But then, as you're watching, you do get caught up in their love. There's dancing, there's singing, there's fighting from the fiance and rebelling against, your social status. So you're watching all this play out, and in your head, as you're watching, you're just like, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm rooting for them, and you kind of almost forget that the movie is going to end with the ship sinking. Like, that's coming up, and it's always kind of a fear that's there. And I think that is a great way to tell a story where you already know the ending, but you're seeing everything that happened prior to. That's kind of why also like movies like Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction captivated people, because it's a story that's not told in the same sequence as a normal story, like beginning, middle, end. It's chopped up and rearranged, so things about certain characters that happen, and then you see it, and then the next scene they're doing something else, and you're like, hold on, how did we get here? And you're watching that. So it's the same with the Titanic. You know that the ship's gonna sink, you know that a lot of people are going to die, but you're meeting all of these characters and engaging with them and watching these people fall in love, knowing a giant tragedy is about to come up. But you get lost just for a little bit.
And also it plays into the trope love and tragedy type of thing as well. Because, two star-crossed lovers, they try to be with each other and they can't be with each other. A big obstacle gets in the way, and that big obstacle is the sinking of the Titanic. It kind of plays that attribute and archetype of, two destined lovers, not meant to be, but here they are, play out. What's going to happen? Is this one going to die, or is this one not going to be able to come back to life? That type of rendition in the theatrical playing of the actual movie gives the audience a more active feeling and, I guess, stakes to watch the film. And tragedy is just a great story to tell, especially in a historical tragedy of the Titanic. It's sinking. It's tragedy. People dying gives the suspense. You already created the suspense towards the end. So now you're just building up the suspense before the suspense actually happens. And, you know, the sinking of the Titanic is a graveyard. So there is room for, I guess, concern for the respect of the people who perished. So you see that in the beginning expedition, you know, taking additional avenues to protect the sinking graveyard.
Well, they weren't really going to protect it. They were going to scavenge it. They were
but
essentially pirates.
They were trying to concerned that this is a graveyard, so just be careful. They were also like concerned a little bit like that too,
which is fair, I think. But I mean, also, it is kind of funny. It's like they were concerned, but they were also there to scavenge, and like they're like, well, they don't need it anymore. You gotta get that heart of the sea. So that part, I like I would say the very beginning and the very end aren't necessarily like the main bulk of what a lot of people talk about in regards to the Titanic, because it's more of modern day. And I think the great way to look at it is those beginning scenes and those ending scenes of the movie are kind of like where the audience was at that time. We're looking at it, you know, we weren't alive during that time. We weren't impacted by it, and a lot of people probably don't have family or knew anyone who talked about it. So it's been 80 something years, and you find someone who was, and you get to feel the intimacy of having lived through something that traumatic through Rose. But at first, you really are just, you know, somebody who's like, man, that's really sad. I can't believe that happened in the past. Anyway, let's see if we can find something cool in this scavenger hunt. But by the end, you're like, this, you know, really isn't worth it, which does end up happening. Brock Lovett, whose team is out there, he basically called off the search for the heart of the sea because Rose claims, you know, didn't have it. He doesn't know where it is, lost there in the wreckage, whatever. And they call off the search. So after hearing it and being there so close to someone who was impacted to it, it actually changes your perspective. And I think that's how that change of heart is what the audience is supposed to feel as well. So the showing of modern day folks talk and in the flashbacks, I think it was supposed to have that parallel effect. So yeah, you go in being kind of like morbidly curious about the sinking of the Titanic, but then you watch real, like, these people live their lives, and they're living their lives without knowing this tragedy is going to happen. And it's that bittersweet aspect to it that's really intoxicating. And even though it's very sad and it's very tragic and it's gut-wrenching, you can't stop watching the film because you want to fall in love with these people again and again, knowing that it's only for a short period of time.
And to submit, you know, the legacy that Titanic brings into the movie industry, you have like 10 or 11 Academy Awards: Best Original Score, Best Picture, Best Director, you know, Visual Effects, Costume, Sound, Film, Sound Editing, Actress, Supporting Actress, Makeup and Hairstyling. It just goes on to show how much of an impact the movie had that particular year in being a big, like, you know, I wouldn't say blockbuster because it doesn't give like a blockbuster feel, but it just really cemented in how
absolutely does. It is absolutely a blockbuster film. It's one of the top grossing films of like all time.
And it wasn't when they were doing it. They weren't necessarily thinking it'll become a blockbuster. It became
But
a
it was
blockbuster.
though.
Well, yes, but it wasn't hyped to be a blockbuster. The original
I think
intent was
also
to tell story through really good storytelling.
no, I agree with that. I'm just saying at this
Well,
point in
Avatar
time,
was meant to be a blockbuster.
it's definitely categorized as a blockbuster at this point in time.
Well,
I
yeah,
think when it was first released, but there were also a lot of other great movies being released at that time. But yes, definitely a blockbuster.
yeah.
It's absolutely one. Because it was, I don't know, just an absolute amazing film. Granted, 1997 had a bunch of like killer films. They had Lolita, Perfect Blue, Cinderella came out, Batman and Robin, the one with Arnold Schwarzenegger in it. But I forgot what it was. There was one movie that did come out in 1997 around the same time as the Titanic, but because the Titanic wasn't kind of viewed to be a blockbuster movie in that sense, whatever movie it was got completely kind of like swept away. It essentially got released just at the wrong time. People went to the movies to go see Titanic, just kind of interest and curiosity, because also Leonardo DiCaprio was really popular.
Yeah.
This was the start of his career, in the beginning of his career. So, yeah, people went to go see it, and then they were like, "Oh, hold on, forget everything else."
Yeah,
y'all went and cried.
Young Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah,
Him being
Kate
the
Winslet,
young
Leonardo DiCaprio. Yeah, Billy Zane also like.
Yeah.
Young Billy Zane, he was the fiance in the movie, and he has a villain look. He basically looks like to me like white Jafar from Aladdin. So I'm just like, this man looks like a villain. I don't trust him. You know, I'm not gonna leave my dog around this man. Like he looks like he kicks puppies, and he will like screw you over. So he had the perfect, handsome, rich, like uncarried, unflinching husband look. And he was perfectly cast for it. You got young Leo, who had the heartthrob look. Kate Winslet's always been gorgeous. Kathy Bates in it. Bill Paxton. They had a great cast, and everyone delivered. Oh, and Victor Garber. I forgot he was in there. Yeah, they had a killer cast. So like, you go and you see it, and then you realize that not only is it well acted, well filmed, the costumes were great, the makeup was great, but also the storytelling. And to me, it's a 10 out of 10. It's only recently when we start applying like modern day logic to some things. Like, you know, what was it? Mythbusters, when they did the could Jack have got on the door as well? Could he have fit on the door? And they decided to test if the door would have been heavy enough in those conditions to hold the both of them, and it was proven that it could be. People were like, she just let him die. Just let that boy die.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, okay. Script writing and actually testing that myth can be a little bit more like up to the imagination of the director, because a lot of times director theories and, you know, their continuity can make sense in some practicality, but most of the time it's just a way to tell the story and tell in a convincing way most of the time. So just the fact that
I think it was just more dramatic.
Film portrayed event to be proven true, you know, just makes it have more merit when the event in the movie was occurring in that particular scene. You know, just
no.
You know, it's a little something. Yeah, we were right, but like at the same time, Titanic. I think the story of the aristocrat trying to find what they belong and just the freedom to travel kind of resonate with me more. because most people on the Titanic were various backgrounds, one in the working class, rich class, but all were like a diversity of characters trying to make a voyage across the Atlantic that could afford it at the time. You also had the stowaway, you also had the crew members, the surviving ship. When there was like 2 ships of Titanic. The main Titanic sunk, and most of the actual luggage was loaded on another ship. So most of that luggage actually has lots of immense value because it was supposed to be on the Titanic, but it was on another ship.
No. Absolutely true. But I think when you talk about it, it was there. What's her name? Violet Jessop, who was she is called the Queen of Sinking Ships or Miss Unsinkable. She was a Argentinian nurse who she survived the sinking of the Titanic. But there was also a sister ship of the Titanic called the HMHS Britannic, that also sunk in 1916, so like 4 years after. And then she also was on the oldest of the elder ships. So there was 3 of them. There was the Titanic, the Britannic, and the Olympic. All 3 of them sunk. And she was on all 3 of them. So, and she didn't die, not once.
I remember that story.
Straight thugging it out, live till 83, just like getting on ships. Like, I'm sorry, but if I saw her get on the last ship, I would have been like, absolutely not. Get off, Violet. You're a terrible nurse. You are not holding up to do no harm code. You are killing everybody. Let's make a movie about that. Let's make a movie about the curse of Violet Jessop. Like, just absolute pandemonium.
So, okay, that does bring into fan theory a controversy. So the controversy is now this: do you think she knew ahead of time that the ships were ill-equipped, so she took precautions herself to be safe where other people didn't know?
I'm going to have to say no, because this is a time when the only way to get to and from other places that were separated by water was by boat, or even if you're trying to travel along a river, you got to do it by ferry. So they had those kind of wind-up motorized cars, I think, at the time. Airplanes weren't really made for like group passengers. I think they were more made so for pilots and stuff, and individual riders. And then you had boats to haul large groups of people. So I don't think that she necessarily went on every ship with like a blow-up inflatable like duck or something because she knew like this ship's going down. I don't think she did that. I'm sure she's been on a lot of voyages outside of those 3. She just happened to be on the sinking of all 3 sister ships back to back. And I'm sure probably after the Titanic, because the last one to sink was the Britannic. So she was on the Olympic in 1911 that crashed, got jacked up. Then the Titanic sunk in 1912, and then she gets back on another ship 4 years later. I'm sure by 1916, she was a great swimmer, or she was totally okay with pushing people out the way.
Well, the Titanic sunk because of the iceberg. So, what did the other sinkings of the Olympic and Britannic formed? Because I remember Britannic, I forgot about the Olympic. But that was the type of class ships that the Titanic was based on. What causes natural, or would it malfunction in the ship?
Basically, there was an explosion that happened by a naval mine from the Imperial German Navy. that was near an island, and because she, I guess, got rocked and tipped or whatever, or there was something that got blown in the ship, it sank in less than an hour. Um, Luckily, this one though, rather than losing most of its passengers and crew, it only 30 people lost their lives, which is still sad, but it wasn't the insanity that the Titanic had. Also, the Titanic wasn't deemed to have to be. It was the unsinkable ship was the name of it, and it had like 2,200 passengers on it, and like 1,500 of them died.
Yeah.
So that's more than half your ship going down, or almost half of your ship. So yeah.
Well, the movie also shows really good scenes of how the actual Titanic in real life was ill-equipped with large evacuation of people off the ship. You see it, throughout the movie of this went wrong, they didn't have enough lifeboats. You actually see it play out in the actual movie. So historical event, like to some degree is being played out and you see it firsthand.
Well, yeah, I think this is more just a repeated pattern of human error when it comes to the tragedy of the Titanic, which is also that's shown in the movie. The human error that's there. It's the ego that exists from the rich aristocrats, where regardless of if they were men, women, or children, they just felt like they should get the boats first. It was the ill-timed planning of the fact that there were so many people in the lower decks of the ship who weren't just workers, but were just poor people. Like there were so many people who barely had enough to get a ticket for the Titanic and really weren't on the upper levels. They weren't running across the ship deck and all of that. They were, in the hull of the ship, the bulk of the ship that's underwater, that were able to get a ticket to go on this once in a lifetime voyage, for them at least, while the people at the top who have the most money and have the most like luxuries, they probably could take this trip as many times as they wanted to because they have the money to do so. So when the ship was hit and there was debris from the iceberg scraping across the lining of the boat and the water began filling up the bottom parts, they basically, the reason why also a lot of people died is because they had to close those lower levels, to keep the ship from sinking faster. So a lot of people who were just essentially just too poor to be considered valuable, enough to be like in a safer position on the ship, and also the ship I think was also kind of overpacked. They just closed the door. So that's it's like it was so many things that were stacked on top of each other. Not just the boat, not just seamen, also not knowing that a iceberg is not just the very tip.
Knowing that the iceberg not knowing that the iceberg will go down that south in I think Greenland, New York area, New England.
Because they were coming from what was it? They were coming from Southampton, UK, and going to New York City. So it was literally going from the UK to New York. And of course, there's ice caps and stuff out there, more so than there are now. But they were sailing at night when they hit it, and it was just so much bad planning. Like not having enough lifeboats because you were confident that your ship isn't going to sink, and also just so you could have more room or less weight on the ship so you could add more people and make this more of a spectacle, led to so many people dying unnecessarily. And a lot of them didn't just die because they went down, like they were in the ship. Like what people also don't know is a fun fact that basically a vortex is kind of created when a heavy object is pulled into the water. So like when you do a cannonball, and you jump in and you go down, it basically creates like a funnel from where you are the base and it goes up, so water is pulled down with you. The same thing with the Titanic. When it went down, even the people who were able to jump off the ship weren't hit by big pieces of metal or whatever. they still got pulled under because the ship was sinking in and it was taking
Yeah.
up a massive space. So a lot of people just drowned from being pulled into the sinking of the vortex. Like that's even more
yeah.
terrifying.
Oh yeah,
Like,
because
yeah.
the Titanic, I believe, were to be such a large mass that it's seeking, because usually when you have ships, they have propellers to push the mass through the water. It's sinking into the water all at once, caused the surrounding water to be like a torrent. So that torrent effect kind of made everyone else in the surrounding area to feel the effects. It's just like water in a rapid scenario. When you have lots of rocks, the water will beat down the rocks and cause many surges of force to go, in the narrow passages. It's the same concept. It's just now this is near the ocean and it's sinking at a rapid rate because the water was filling in really fast when it hit the iceberg.
Yeah, they were going extremely fast, but also they were just, again, there is a high confidence that exists within the film, and I think that's also something that, like, even now, so like there's a hurricane happening now, and like it's ramping up and stuff. So when these big forces of nature and these big like cataclysmic things, that what can you do as a singular human or as a group of humans against something that is naturally forming? And you're not gonna just punch your way through it. You can't bomb your way through it. Like it's coming, and you just kind of you gotta ride it out. That's what it feels like when you watch the film. You get so kind of caught up in the human romance and the beauty of it all that you kind of forget that these people are essentially on a tugboat in the ocean. There's so much risk that is implied there, and it's because you have the safety of like the ship's completely safe. You go into the lower decks with Jack. He takes Rose down there. She gets to see what it's like to be with the common man and dance and sing and spin around and eat different foods, and it's supposed to be a really great fun time. And it's completely, a parallel to what you have on the upper decks where Jack has to wear now a suit. So he isn't seen as, poor, and people don't know that he isn't of their class. And they like basically do the song and dance themselves unless they're alone and on one-on-one time. Having all of that like happening when you know that there's this giant, huge piece of ice that's sitting out in the ocean just waiting. It's beautiful, but it's also daunting and very kind of it's this horrible thing that hangs overhead that you really can't do anything about. Like, we can't change the story of the movie, and they're not going to change the ending of the movie just so people feel good. And I love that. I love that they didn't even try to be like, everybody live. They said, nah.
When Titanic was built in 1912, it was not one of the largest passenger ships in the world, but it was like, at that point, one of the largest ships ever built. So the capacity of the Titanic sinking also had a big impact in the world of shipbuilding, and largest ship at the time, the unsinkable is sinkable. What does this mean for other ships of its similar nature? Does it mean we're safe? Do we have to build more? All those, type of questions were answered when the Titanic sunk. And it took a long time to find exactly where it sunk as well, because it was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Just
again, yeah.
You had this wide mileage span to look for, based on navigation reports of where its preceded destination was. So you had to look in that surrounding area, and the people and the wreckage were also factors to take a note of the buoyancy and mileage and how far it went.
Mm-hmm. Now, I do think that what's important as well to keep in mind is like, so when you're watching in the movie, they do it differently. In the movie, when you see these lifeboats going down, which it's after the sinking and everything, you get to see this beautiful love story, and now you're seeing the panic as people need to be saved. The sadness that happens is that essentially, women or children are supposed to be boarded in first, but it's also women of children who are of like the higher standing class, the upper like who's ever left, I guess, get on a boat. So you see the rich fiance basically punch his way onto a boat. He don't care nothing at all. He's like, men, women, and like men stay behind. Absolutely not. So he gets on a boat. And when you see the sink go down, you see that very sad scene where everybody's kind of sitting on these boats in the water. They're shivering, they're freezing because again, it's in the middle of the night. These people aren't wearing like, jackets and fully dressed to be in the Atlantic Ocean. They're freezing, they're shivering, they've either fallen into the water or they're sitting near an iceberg or pieces of ice. But these boats are all full when you look at it. Or they look like they're full. But in actuality, for the actual sinking, there were only 20 lifeboats on the actual ship, which like 4 of them were, I guess, collapsible ones, but in total there were 20, and in total they were supposed to be able to hold like 1,100, 1,200 people. So that wasn't even all of the people on board. So there still would have been at least half the people on board dying, or not being able to get on. But the issue was they didn't even fill the boats up to full capacity because they were in such a panic. So most of the boats were half full. So more people could have lived, more people could have survived, but because there was such a large panic, again, that beauty and like the fun and energy that you get from young love and discovering who you are, all of that's kind of stripped away to base human instinct where it's like survival, getting out of this situation, and ultimately like non-logical thinking, which is the same thing that caused the ship to sink to begin with. It's just bad planning, panic, and you kind of go back to that tribal mindset where you're just like, I want to live. That's it. That's nothing else. So I'm sure there were plenty of people who were like, don't forget filling up the boat. And more people, stop looking for people to put on. Drop it. Put us in the water. Get us away from the ship. And so more people actually ended up dying than I think needed to actually like ever be in that situation to begin with, because bad planning, human confidence. It's really sad, and that's what makes it, I think, even more tragic when you look at how the actual story. Like, I think the movie made it nicer. They at least gave us music as the ship went down.
Well, also with the illogical thinking of human brains, when you go into desperation, self-preservation, you think a lot differently. When your life is in danger, you don't do the rational thinking that you're going to normally do. So when you panic, you actually get in a state of alertness where your only concern is to get out of it. So your morals are not really in the high ground. Your thinking is like radicalized. You're just in the moment, trying to get through it and trying to survive, trying not to get into the situation of people around you. That type of mentality is like similar to a field of war kind of thing as well. So, you're doing everything you can to get out of the situation, but those things around you limiting you and obstacles along the way. So it really tests how you can be, being in the place at the right time also has a factor, but also getting through it and getting to a point, when you're on a lifeboat, when you have to jump overboard and
Well, I
take your
don't even
chances
know if
at.
it's. Yeah, I think the main difference though is that when you watch the movie and we've gone through this whole transformation process, right? Watching,
Mhm.
Rose not look down on people who are poor and also not be so, self-consumed in her own, like,
Yeah.
woe is me, I have to marry this guy. Which, of course, an arranged marriage when you want to live your life and you're this truly adventurous soul, yes. But it's a bit more tragic when you realize that here's Jack, someone who had to stow away himself because I remember, I think what he was like running from people anyway because he either stole something or didn't do something or whatever. He stows away on the Titanic to get out of a bad situation that he had found himself in the UK. He
Yeah,
gets on this boat.
wasn't no people on board that knew him previously or something like that as well?
Yeah, well, he had friends and stuff that were on there, but I don't think they were stowaways. I think they were working on the ship, but he was a stowaway because he was running from people. He, like in the movie,
Yeah.
when the movie starts, he finds a way to sneak on the ship to get away from people
Yeah.
who are chasing him. And so when you think about the fact that he basically ran away from a terrible situation to be in an even worse situation by the end of it all, yes, he got to fall in love. Yes, he got to have this moment of like happiness and got to see what it was like to kind of be an aristocrat. At the end of the day, he was constantly battling societal prejudice
Well,
and dealing with Rose and teaching her and all of that. So for him to die in a way where when you go back to natural instincts, people's prejudice and the way people view others, their true inner selves, that comes out as well. When they're justifying their actions, which is what we saw. After you get this whole like reteaching of we're all just people trying to survive in the world. Let's all be great, be adventurous, live life to the fullest. Bam, iceberg, and then everyone goes back to their base setting where they're like, forget this. You're poor. I'm getting on the boat. Women and children, forget that. I'm a man. I don't care. I want to live. It's stuff like that. So I think that was the saddest part was after you get to ride the highest high of watching two people fall in love and kind of find their person, at least for that period of their life, to ultimately getting not only ripped apart, but just like the basic thinkings of man kicking right back in because people want to live. So nobody else on that ship was out there like learning new life lessons. We forget that we're just watching two people out of what, almost 2,500. So so by the time we get kicked back into reality, I think that's what made a lot of people like, oh, like it hurts because you remember that there's still like a whole 2,000 and odd number of people who aren't having these life-changing revelations, who aren't trying to be the best that they can be. They're only being themselves. And sometimes someone's natural self is terrible or isn't great and isn't for the greater good. So, yeah.
Well, also, you have Romeo and Juliet, the Montagues and Capulets. The director kind of dramatizes the hostility between the rich and the poor. Rose feels so suffocated by the expectations of her wealthy family, finds that she nearly kills herself in the film's first act. He's portraying the upper
dramatic.
class. Yeah,
so
overly humble, amoral. We also arrogance dooms the ship. We have Carl Hockey's abusive behavior shocks Rose. Rose's mother Ruth shamelessly uses her daughter as a pawn. New money retains her moral center. The penniless artist Jack, on the other hand, various experiences over possessions encourage Rose to do the same. We show how the third-class passengers caged below the deck perish at greater rates than the first-class passengers who bribed and carted their way into the lifeboats. So we really see,
and like layer by layer, how the movie depicts class and how class is a factor throughout the movie. Even in the situation with the lifeboats, to the beginning of the ship, when the people were like cast away into the ship's lower portions and just sit there to be, less able to pay for the luxury of the ship and the fine dining above.
Absolutely. But I mean, I also feel that's a consistent factor that's shown throughout the whole movie. And I think a ship is also one of the perfect ways to do so. It's a very self-contained setting. So we're not going to different parts of a city or different parts of the world where sometimes that theme can be used and portrayed in that way. We're on a ship where it's literally showing you a caste system. It's showing you level by level the worth of human life. And it's literally like there was no trickle down of like benefits and like economics and great feelings, because like the rich weren't interested in sharing their wealth or comforts or even safety with people who were poor. They had no interest, and that was really also left up to the discretion of the crew, because the crew were also in charge of like putting people on these boats. So the idea that like bribes were even a thing to even be considered when the ship is going down, one, people not abandoning their posts to live. Some, the closer the ship is getting to being completely sunk, of course they're going to start abandoning their posts. But more importantly, the people in the very beginning still taking bribes as the ship is sinking is such a insane idea, at least to me, and I think to a lot of people. But it's also very commonplace. It's like, hey, there's a tragedy happening. They're like, yeah, I'll take that. I'll take $20. I'm like, buddy, you're not even on the boat. Do y'all have a boat? Like crew? Like, it's like, nope. We're just doing this for that extra 20, a nice tip, a nice gratuity, and that's the worth of a human life, essentially, in their eyes. And it's completely insane.
Oh yeah, don't forget you have the power and study as well. The ship is very powerful, gigantic. The fantasies of the male characters being powerful. We project their own feelings onto the ship, regarding it as majestic and unsinkable. Cal, who's the character, could not sink this ship. Rose Scour's is made for fixating. So on the ship's sheer enormity, we hear even Jack when he climbs the railing of the ship and yells, "I'm the king of the world." The ship's later takes the power for granted to the extent that he misses critical warnings and speed up the attract favorable press. The first class passengers to retain their power. Even under dire circumstances, it's also a clear display. The sinking of the ship only shadows all of fantasies of power, showing man to be powerless in the face of, unpredictability and tragic as it may be.
It was insane. I think also a thing that does play into that of the yes, men being powerless, but also this weird feeling of nobility that was shown was with the captain deciding to stay behind, and he's like, the captain always goes down with his ship, and I'm like, yeah, that's very noble and that's very great. But maybe we should have you answer for how we got here. You're the person in charge. Maybe there should have been more training for your crew. It just felt like as you're watching all of these people basically turn into like scared animals to survive for an era that was put on the place of like, regardless of how much money was on the ship and how many people of lower class were on the ship, how many crew, whatever, the main responsibility for the sinking of the Titanic will always be on the captain and the people who were in charge of maintaining the ship's safety. Like, we can say that the rich people on there were crappy and terrible for the way that they acted throughout the whole film and probably also in real life, especially towards the end. But at the end of the day, the main people in charge were the people who were controlling the ship. The entire vessel being maintained, like not even the people who were in the lower decks keeping the engines running and cranking and fixing problems, making sure that the ship didn't stall. those aren't the people that I place all of the, at the end of the day, blame on. I feel like the true blame comes in the fact that the people who were in charge to keep everyone safe did not do their job. And then they also failed in the second coming of not filling those boats up to full capacity. I don't care if it's dipping a little bit in the water. Get people on the boat. Like the fact that they were taking bribes and not able to even understand the simple logic of an iceberg, like all of that makes it so much harder to, even at the end of the day, you want to be upset at these characters and you want to say this is a villain and that's a good guy and all of that. No, I blame the captain and his actual crew on deck, on board, who were steering the ship. Those are the villains of the story to me, because we never will know what could have been with Jack and Rose going forward. If once they got to, New York, would her family disown her? Would she still have to be forced to marry Cal? Would she still have to be forced to do this, that, or the other? Would Jack stick around? He's someone who survives because he's scrappy, quick-witted, and he's got street smart. He's going to New York City. How do we not know if they have a falling out? He's not going to just continue on, trying to be a wanderer and a Rolling Stone. Like, you have no idea, and we'll never get to really know. We can only fantasize. Because of that iceberg.
The main message is love can't conquer all. Even with Jack as immensely in love with Rosa he was, he is a metaphor and, literally for the well-being of her possibly being safe as a sacrifice for the one he loves. So as much as it was a tragedy in love, at the same time, it's also a sacrifice for the love to those who you love, and how much are you willing to do for them for the concept of love. Because when you're tested in that priority type mode, when love reveals all in the end, that's how we see the movie played out towards the end. Yes, Jack doesn't survive, big spoiler, but Rose is, surviving. Not, we can say that it is for his sacrifice that she's able to live. But also, having a reason to fight for living is a big factor too. He just died. I should be living. I shouldn't be in this terrible moment to feel empty.
But she didn't even have that.
I know.
But that wasn't like, it wasn't like, they just ended up on the door. Like they got to the top of the ship. They got to the safety boats, and Rose was like essentially going to be put on to a boat. Like I think she was supposed to get on there, or tried to force her on there, and she forced her way off to stay with Jack. So I wouldn't say that it's necessarily just a sacrifice of Jack. I think it's more of an... I do see it more equal. I would say maybe 60-40. Yes, of course, Jack lost his life, but Rose was absolutely willing to die with him. I do find that to be the one thing that people may overlook because of the door scene. Is what we all kind of remember. But she did say, forget living, forget these riches, rags to riches and riches to rags. I want to be with my man, and they went into the water the other day. So it wasn't, and I think that's why Jack was able to continue that notion of I will do whatever it takes to protect the person that I love and the person I care about, and for Rose vice versa. But one of them had to make the choice. Was it going to be her that dies, or was it going to be him that dies? And also I think for the natural essence of storytelling and just how we are as a society, if we would have saw Jack on that door and Rose was in the water, we would have been like, you for real? You are a man. Like people would have naturally been like, this isn't as romantic anymore. Not him letting her die. Like if you would have switched the roles, the romantic feel is immediately cut down. I feel naturally for most people, if you were to switch it doesn't hold the same emotional impact.
Now, if he was the man and he tried to grab her and she let herself go, then that's totally different. Because that's the woman choosing to let go and not have them, But
that's not what happened
Jack
either.
is the one. Well, yeah, but Jack is the
Jack
one
didn't let go.
who let himself go. Yeah, he let himself go for the benefit of
He let
Rose.
him stay in. Yes, he stayed in the water. But her saying, she said, I'll never let go, Jack. I'm saying if you literally just switched your position, don't add anything new, don't take anything away. Yeah. Just switch their positions. Put him on the door, her in the water. Him being like, I'll never let go, Rose. And people will not react in the same way. This movie would not have the critical acclaim that it had if that was the ending. Yeah, absolutely not.
If that was the ending, I probably would give it. If that was the ending, I was like, oh wow. So the stowaway who stuck on the ship, who now learned his lesson, hopefully, is now the biggest victim? What? Why is he the biggest victim? He should be the one sacrificing himself.
Yeah, but that also perpetuates the same mindset that the rich people have when getting on the boat. To us as a people, we feel more comfortable with someone who is poor, and like we're looking at Jack and we're like, you're a poor dude. She's a rich, young, beautiful woman. Of course you should die. Like, if we were to weigh it out, even in public favor, we would rather see Rose alive than Jack. And that just continues to like reteach that the cycle still exists. We're not just watching it from the film. We also have that internalized inside of us, which is an important thing to think about. Because again, like I said, if you switch it, you're not getting the same. Not from
yes, but the thing is, there is one thing: the trope of the woman dying over the man actually have a bigger impact on storytelling and how you tell it. But Titanic is not that type of story. It's this more traditional type story with the man being sacrificed for the woman mentality. Because keep in mind, this is the beginning of the 19th century. So like, this is where class was really at question and how you should live your life. If you have a future, you should live it. Type of mentality is really big. And this also is leading up to, World War II. But wiping the bridges of that class struggle. So it being the way it was, it kind of told in its own accord how it's going to be and how it's going to happen, and the people doing the things doing in the beginning.
Yeah, but I feel like we're also skipping the Great Depression. Like,
but you had the fall of World War II, the struggle for all classes, but the Great Depression.
No, what I'm saying in regards to class is that when the Great Depression hit and Wall Street fell, the amount of people who literally took their lives because they were rich and now no longer have that, for people who were already poor, some people didn't even know the Great Depression was happening because they were so poor, nothing new had changed. They were like, we still have nothing. But the fiance, Cal, in the movie, they wrap up his storyline by saying he basically unalives himself. He gains over himself once the fall of Wall Street happens because he loses his fortune. Like, it just goes on to show that, like, if you are in a greater position, it is very, very, very unlikely you will ever trade that out to be in a less fortunate one for someone else. And then if it's forcefully taken from you, how strong of a person are you to either regrow, continue on, whatever? And I think it was a great showing that you had someone like Jack, for Leonardo DiCaprio's first character. He was poor, even poor his whole life. Basically, literally ran and hid for his life on the ship, and was still willing to give it up for somebody who was in a better position than himself, because he cared about them and he loved them. While on the flip side, you have this fiance who had money, and had the capacity to be a better man and just chose not to be the entire time. Took the seat of somebody else who might have died or didn't make it onto the ship. And then at the end of it all, still didn't go on to live his life to the fullest because he didn't get to keep all of his money and riches. Like, life wasn't
But
worth
why
living
should
to
he?
him anymore.
I mean, life is what you make of it. This is what I say. What you do in life is up to you. But you have to remember how you go about it, how you approach it. You know, how do you, once you stumble or once you fall down big time, how do you get back up? Are you able to get back up? Are you able to do things that will, like, you could grow as a person? Do you take that as a sentiment and actually approach life in a different way? Or do you approach life in a similar way as before? You were grateful that it happened, but now you got better. Do you go back to that type of mentality where, well, if it ain't broke, not fix it, why should I fix it when I am the person who is literally living life right now?
No,
So,
I agree. I think for majority of it, life is what you make it. But I think that's
yeah.
also a more privileged way to think of things. Sometimes life is literally what's handed to you and what's given to you. That's my basis of it, at least. Like, life is what you make it when you have more control or perceived control. But just like, an iceberg in the middle of the freaking ocean, you could absolutely think that you have full control and full, authority and autonomy, and then something that's completely out of your reach, your maintenance, all of that can come rocketing through and completely wipe out whatever plan you may have had. And that is the nature of the universe. So I think that there is a great perceived notion for most of us who are able to live more safe and contained lives, that we have the power to decide what happens and what doesn't. But I think there's also a good understanding that, life comes at you fast. It's fast as an iceberg in the middle of the ocean. So what you do after that is up to you. Yeah.
Hey, what we do after this is the podcast. We're going to another podcast next week. This is what we're choosing what to do right now. And, Titanic is bringing that up. Be happy for who you are. Be happy for what you have. If you can strive for more, strive for it. If you can settle and, have what you need, then go for that. There is no right or wrong situation, but always have an ethical and good character to be in morale. Sometimes following everything may not always be what you need to do. You might have to take a risk, but also following everything can set you in a motion that can potentially be beneficial. You just don't know how it's going to be beneficial for you.
Absolutely.
So, as we have closing thoughts, I think we can conclude that Titanic has so many different themes and so many different recommendations from people who watch it. It gives a great feeling, self-worth, class system, the ethical background to one's duty to be responsible in life and how you perceive life. So with that, I think that's closed.
That's a wrap.
All right, guys. Don't forget you can watch us near podcasts near you: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. You can find us on the website at www.ncanimePodcast.com. We update the website and actually see the episodes in live time. And join us on the Patreon community, where you can join us in the multiple tiers to fund us and support us in our creative vision for MC Anime Podcasts, so we can continue to bring more episodes to you and you guys to enjoy it as the fan, as any one fan should do.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed this discussion, which just like the iceberg in Titanic, it's more than what you saw at the top layer.
Exactly. The more you go
Much
down, the more you get the deeper, dark depths of life and what it offers. Just like the iceberg theory we did before. See you guys.
See ya.
This concludes another episode of MC Anime Podcast. MC Anime Podcast is available on podcast directories like Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. We also have our website at mcanimepodcast.com. If you want to directly support us, then follow Patreon blog MC Anime. Finally, if you want services for hire, then we're available on Fiverr for audio and video production, graphic design, idea consulting, and blog and article writing.